So in this video, we're going to be talking about functions. So we saw a similar program to this, and we call it the Hello World program, where we just print out something to screen on the console in episode 1. And we're actually going to be making this program using a function. So why would we want to use a function? We want to use functions in our program to modularize it, so we could create a function to do a certain thing. And that function that is filled with a bunch of code, if we want to repeat it or pass a different argument to it, it's very easy to do that. You don't have to keep repeating code. So we're actually going to write a function, and I will explain. So say we want to have a void function. That means that this function, because it's void, is not going to return anything. So if you look at the main function, we actually return 0, and that's because it's an integer function. And so void functions are not data type. Void means that you cannot print anything out. So if we want to say void, say hello world, okay? So you would have your data type here, the name of the function, and every time after that, for any function, you want to have 2 parentheses, like you did for the main function, and then a set of curly braces. So we can do the same thing for a different function. Say we want a function that can square a number. Or let's do cube a number, right? So cube x, and then in here, that. So like this would be a double function, right? And that's just a floating point number. So like your decimal is your 1.6, 1.7. But something special about this one is you want to take an argument to cube, right? You want to know what x is. And so in this, you're going to have parameters, and so that's what's going to be placed into this function. So for that, we would say double a variable x, right? Just any double variable. And you could pass like 12, 12.5, whatever you want to execute this code right here. So since it is a double and not a void, it can indeed return something. So we're going to return x times x times x. And so that's helpful because now in this function right here, you can say cube x and say you want cube 2. You just write that code and it'll cube 2. So if you want to print that out at the same time, you can see out that. So at the top of every program, you always want to have using namespace std if you're using variables. And I would hope you're using variables in a program. Otherwise, I don't know how it would run. So we're going to run this, and you'll see that, right, 2 cube is 8. And so you can see how if you're cubing a lot of things, you don't have to rewrite x times x times x so many times, right? You just call that function, easy, quick, fast, and you can edit this function, and it'll fix the entire program. It makes it a lot more easier. Similarly, you can print out in a void function. You can't return, but you can use cin and cout within void functions, so that's good. And you can print out hello world. And my spelling is just too good. Alright. So the way you call void functions in here is very similar. Except void functions do not take, or this function in particular, doesn't take any arguments right here. There's no arguments right here. So you don't need to pass any arguments. You can just call it like that. Call it by the name and have parentheses. Terminate every line with a semicolon. And that's going to print out just like it did before. So basically what's happening is when you're calling this function, it's looking up above the main function. So anything created from top to bottom is in sequential order. And so if you call cube x below the definition of cube x, it's going to know it. If it main was above all of this, then it will not know this. Okay? So when the compiler sees the main function, it's going to hit this function and say, hey, we need to look for a function called, say, hello world. It's going to find it up here, and basically what that does, it takes this chunk of code and copies it and pastes it where this is. So it basically does this, it does the contents within it and paste that right here. Right? So that's what the compiler does behind the scene.